This is Your Superior Self, episode 57, Living Authentically with Dr. James Kelley.
Millennials, they have a belief that their voice should be heard, right? So they talk up in meetings. You know, you go back a generation, you're new to a company, you don't say a damn thing. You just sit there until you earn your stripes. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. I think it's a blessing because they come with new insights. It's a curse because when their manager is older and old school, they frown upon that, even if their advice is misplaced. And I'm getting to your question in a second. You know, one of the things we have to also recognize that millennials were raised in a time where they had access to give their voice whenever they wanted. Social media allowed them, the construct of social media said you can put your thoughts out there right away. And you know what? And when they're the right thoughts, you get immediate feedback right away. Is that their fault? No, that's the system. That's the construct of social media and instant gratification. I don't think it's their fault. I think what happens is over time, they acclimate to the new environment, but they come in with this preconceived idea of giving voice and opinions, and I think that's okay. So I think, there are certain challenges to millennials and leading millennials. I think the biggest thing that you have to acknowledge with them, and I think motivate them, is you have to treat them like human beings first. And you have to acknowledge they do have thoughts and opinions, and you have to give them... You have to, I think, in my mind, and I have not managed many millennials. I teach lots of millennials and now Gen Zers. When you make them feel valued and give them little mini projects that show that they can succeed, that builds respect with them and for them.
What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Your Superior Self. The podcast that breathes inspiration into your body to help get you motivated to become your superior self. I'm your host, Treys, and I am excited to be here today. I love podcasting, and it feels like forever since we did an episode, even though it was only a week ago. I am excited to be here. It feels great. I had a great conversation with Dr. James Kelley. Very authentic conversation, and I'm excited to get to that. But before I do, I wanted to read to you an excerpt from the book, The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes. And in this chapter, which is called The Know-It-All Mask, Lewis talks about his realization of the know-it-all mask that helped him pivot the book and talk more about his journey to success rather than his expertise of success. And the excerpt goes like this. The proposal ended up taking years. The writing did not come easily to me. I couldn't get the tone right. Then I realized what was blocking me. I was pretending to be way smarter than I was. I was being egotistical. Who was I to lecture anyone on greatness? That's when I made my pivot on the book. I decided the book should be about the journey to greatness. Although I knew quite a bit, instead of focusing on what I did know, I would focus on what I still needed to learn. I would be a student. I would ask questions. I would be, as Mike said, 2 ears in 1 mouth. I knew there were people out there who knew a lot more about greatness than I did, and so I went out searching for them, asking questions along the way about how they got to where they are and what made them tick. The School of Greatness had questions at its foundation, not answers. I was there with the listener, as a fellow traveler, learning just as much as they did in the process of putting this community together. That reading really hit home for me in 2 different ways. One, I have to be more authentic with myself and transparent with myself and stop pretending to be the expert in subjects that I'm not the expert in, and that I need to be okay with that and accept it and not worry about what other people think about that, and ask more questions, be more curious. And 2, it really hit home for me when he said that he's not the expert. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the podcast. I want to demonstrate to you my road. I want to demonstrate to you guys my journey. I am not the expert. When it comes to being the best in self-development, I am probably far from it. I am just like you right now, listening to this. I am just like you. I have your problems. I have your mentality. I have your self-confidence where I don't believe in myself all the time. I don't think that I can do things because I don't have the best education. I feel like it's hard for me to achieve success because I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm older. I'm 36. Well, I'm almost 36, I should say. I'm not quite 36, but I feel like time is against me. I feel like I've had this awakening late in life where I wanted to get better and develop myself as an individual and as a person, as a father, late. Like I didn't have this consciousness to this area in my life where I was ready for self-growth. I was always worried about making money and worrying about, just making money and coasting. And it wasn't until, I'm not going to go into the details, but I am just like you. I am listening to these interviews and I'm learning and I'm taking notes and I am trying to be the best version of myself. And I don't judge anyone for their journey. I don't judge anyone for where they're at and where they're trying to go. And that's the biggest thing. And as long as you can go through life and you can be open to ideas and people's opinions on ideas, and you can be open to the fact that you can change as long as you put the work in and as long as you invest in yourself, then your life is going to be a lot happier. You're going to have this freedom, this uplifting, this weight off your shoulders of trying to be something that you're not, trying to be this version of a person who society says you have to be. And I'm starting to peel back the onion. I guess that's the best way to put it, is these layers of what society said I had to be and what I thought that I have to be. And I'm discovering who I really am and what I really want. And it hasn't been an easy road. No way has this been easy for me, because I'm learning my weaknesses and I'm discovering more weaknesses as I go along. But the exciting part is that I'm learning my strengths as well. Like I'm learning more strengths, new strengths, and it's exciting. And I'm more open to the world and I'm more open to opinions on different worldviews, and I am growing as an individual, and it's exciting. And I can show up to be a better father, as a better husband. I am definitely not the best, and I am trying to be better than I am today. But the first step, I think, for you, the listener, and this happened to me, is just realizing that what society says that you are right now is not who you are. You need to figure out who you really are and be transparent with yourself and be your most authentic self. I apologize about the long rant, but it kind of goes along with what I'm trying to do for the month of April, which is the April challenge, which is very generic, I know, but I want to put myself in uncomfortable positions at least once a day for the month of April and see how I do. See what kind of growth I can create. And I challenge you guys to do the same. Let me know what you guys do. What kind of situations you guys put yourselves in, and then let me know the results. I'm dying to hear from you. So let me know. You can email me at treydowns@superiorself.net. Hit me up on Instagram at tdowns80 or Twitter at downstrey. You can hit me up on the website at yoursuperiorself.com. I love to hear from you guys. You guys send me a ton of great feedback. I love you guys. Make sure, if this is the first episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. Enough about me, and let's get to the real reason why we're here tonight, and that's because I have Dr. James Kelley on the show. He is the founder and CEO of qChange and the author of The Crucible's Gift, 5 Lessons from Authentic Leaders Who Thrive in Adversity. qChange specializes in creating behavioral nudges at the point of choice using real-time experiments combined with technology. The Crucible's Gift is based on interviews with 140 plus executives that range from Fortune 100 companies to entrepreneurs and everything in between. Previously, James consulted for Fortune 500, ran his own consultancy, and taught at various institutions. Currently, his audiobook is live, and his startup, qChange, just won a startup competition for the IoT World Conference. Man, that's amazing. I'm excited to have Dr. Kelley on the show, so without further ado, here is my interview and conversation with Dr. James Kelley. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Today, I am joined by a special guest. He is an author, an entrepreneur. His name is Dr. James Kelley. Dr. Kelley, welcome to the show, brother.
Trey, thank you so much for having me on the show. And just so your audience know, we just had a 30-minute pre-call conversation. It was pretty awesome, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and what people probably can't see because they haven't found my YouTube channel yet is that you're talking out of a box in Dubai.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So
which
go ahead.
Sounds like a precursor to, like I said earlier, some sort of like illicit material.
So go ahead and give us like a quick, catch us up on you. Like, what are you up to right now? What are you doing?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I live just outside Dubai in a town called Alain, AL space AIN. If you guys want to Google that, you'll notice it's right next to the Oman border in the Middle East. And currently, I have about 3 things that I do, maybe 4. I'm a dad of 4 kids, which is my primary job, I think, not to screw them up by the time they're 18. My second job is I'm an author, so I do a lot of promotions and conversations. Hopefully we'll talk about that today. My third is I'm an entrepreneur of a startup called qChange, which is in the behavioral Internet of Things. And if you don't know what that means, essentially so many of our items now are actually connected to the internet. So internet, and then it's of things. So things are things like phones, refrigerators, stoves, industrial, healthcare stuff. And I'm in a new unique space called behavioral. And then the last thing that actually pays the bills is that I am a professor of marketing.
That is a ton of potential there. I mean, the Internet of Things, I've heard it before. Very interesting stuff there. Guys, check it out. If you don't know what we're talking about, Google it, because I've heard it before. And before I talked to Dr. Kelley, I didn't really understand what the behavioral side of things were, but it's very interesting in what he's going to do with that. So follow him, reach out with him, and connect with him, and figure out what he's up to. So a little bit about you. You are like the guru of leadership.
Wow. I've been called a lot of things, asshole, punk, whatever, but guru is not one of them. I'll take it and run with it.
You are the guru of leadership. So why don't you go ahead and tell us, how do we become the best leaders that we can possibly be?
So, wow, I've got a lot of questions, and that one's probably the most direct question I've got. I've got a lot of fringe questions. I really appreciate that question. For me, the premise of my book, The Crucible's Gift, is really all about this idea of embracing your adversity. And in the book, I interviewed well over 140 leaders that were on my podcast, Executives After Hours. Podcast is no longer going. However, all the interviews are still on iTunes and all of that as well. So if you want to check it out, there's some really great ones with Fortune, like 2 company executives, all the way down to entrepreneurs and everything in between. But what I found is that these leaders who really thrived, who were amazing human beings, because to me, you could be a leader, but you could be a jerk, right? To me, the best leaders are the ones who are just good human beings who inspire. And that is what I found, is that they were able to take their adversity and move from this idea of it happened to me to it happened for me. And that simple change in preposition created a new meaning in their mind that allowed them to grow. And so this, to me, is really the most fundamental things in our lives, is that we take adversity moments. Let me give you an example, and I'll just give you one quick personal example, is that my dad died when I was 20 years old. And so for any of your listeners out there, and even for you, Trey, like at 20, you're pretty impressionable, and you're moving from this phase of your dad from father to friend. Like you're in that transition period where he's not going to tell you what to do anymore. He's just going to be there to listen and support you. And so at the time I thought I got robbed, right? And my dad died. He was only 49 at the time, and it sucked. I mean, to be frank, it sucked, obviously. And I went through a really dark place, and I drank a lot. I finished university. Luckily, I had a really awesome girlfriend that I was a jerk to at the end of the day, but she was amazing and kept me on the rails enough to graduate. And shortly after my dad died, like about 2 years later, I got a DUI. And I think that DUI was probably part of the mourning of my dad, because I would still drink and drive and just do stupid stuff, thinking that I was invincible. And more importantly, what come to realize is that I thought that I could die any moment. And when you lose a parent when you're young, and when they're young, what you start to think in your mind, and I still have this battle in my head, is that I have a clock ticking, and my clock is ticking to 49. And so I got to accomplish all of this stuff before I get to 49, or I'm going to die. And so clearly that's not a healthy state of mind in a lot of ways. But what I found is that after I got the DUI, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And the reason why is that I had to, based on the court mandate, I had to go to an outpatient program for 2 years. And so for the first 6 months, I had to go I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 times, but I had to go 3 or 4 times a week for 3 hours a night. And then I had to go for 6 months, once a week for 3 hours a night. And then I had to go see a therapist for once a month for a remainder of a year. And with that, you as an individual, I think I was 24 at the time, you have a choice. And I can tell you, a lot of my friends would have gone into that saying, okay, I just need to tick this box and get through this. I don't care, blah, blah, blah. This happened to me. What I decided to do is say, okay, how can I utilize this to become a better human being? And so I didn't say that my dad died, it happened to me. I got a DUI, it happened to me. What I started to do is say, okay, this adversity happened for me. What can I do with it moving forward? What opportunities do I see to be a better human being? And this is what I saw in so many leaders who really were amazing, right? They're leading major companies, millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars for some of them. And one of them, a Google exec, was in $1 billion company. So multi-billion dollar company. And they all had these tragedies that happened. And instead of going to a dark place and using the to me, they used the phrase for me. And I just thought that was really powerful. And all sorts of other outcomes happen after that, better self-awareness, the idea that they want to live with more integrity, live with more compassion, value relationships. But the thing that I found was most interesting is no adversity mattered, no preposition mattered if they didn't have a growth mindset or a learning mindset, because that curiosity is actually what drove them, is to understand why something happened for them. And in that curiosity is where the growth ended up happening.
What was your relationship with your dad?
It's a great question. That's a long pause for me. I think that's a difficult question for me because I don't know. I don't know what it was. I don't know. I was my dad's only child. My mom was married previously, and my dad adopted those 2 kids. So I was my dad's full blood, if you will, child. That sounds very Harry Potter-esque. I was my dad's. His semen was in me. That also sounds bad. So I can't find the right way to say that. Okay, so I think that my dad was very old school in his method of raising kids, and his dad was very old school, and so neither of my parents were very engaged. They were supportive but not engaged, and so my dad and I didn't do a lot of activities together. My dad was overweight. He had sleep apnea. He had high blood pressure. He had gout. He was not an active adult. So we did not bond over a lot of things except for watching NASCAR on Sunday afternoons, Seattle Seahawks, and Portland Trail Blazers. And that was about it. He wasn't a bad person at all. He his upbringing taught him that solutions were solved by physicality. So if you were in trouble, you got smacked. If you lied, you got smacked. If you held your fork wrong, you got smacked. So in hindsight, at the time, I always equated wrongdoing to violence. As an adult, I've decoupled the two into that's what he knew. It didn't make it right. So this is where I was saying that we started to transition from parent-child to friends. And you could see the relationship starting to change in that manner. And we grew up poor, right? I grew up lower middle class. If we didn't take any vacations, I think we took 2 vacations, 3 vacations my whole life. It wasn't a yearly thing. If we took a vacation, it was a staycation, so we had to clean out the damn garage or behind the shed or some shit like that. That was like manual labor for us all. It was never, let's go to the beach. So my parents didn't value experiences, and so I didn't have them. So I'm kind of talking around your question because I don't know what that relationship with my dad was. I think that he was loving and he cared, but he also was in Vietnam, so he had PTSD, which I wasn't described, or that wasn't a thing then. But it's clear now, looking back, he had PTSD, hated crowds. He would act totally different. But what I can tell you, and this is the one thing that I always found really interesting, is all of my friends' parents remember my dad totally different than I remember them. They all remember him being this amazing human being that was compassionate and kind and funny and supportive. And I'm always like, who the hell is this guy I don't remember that relationship. So I think the point I'm trying to make, and I catch myself doing it with my kids, by the way, all the time, is that he had a delineation between a parent and a parent of other kids. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it was a complex relationship, I guess, at the end of the day.
And then with your kids, your 4 children, how do you take that idea of what a father should be, and how do you kind of transition it into what you want to be as far as for them?
I still make mistakes, for sure. I often joke that, and there's actually a whole layer of truth to this, by the way. As yourself as a dad of 3, I often joke that it's not a matter of if I screw up my kids. It's just really a matter of what degree I screw them up. And it's having kids is an 18-year psychological experiment, right? What works, what doesn't work, what do I have to change, what do I have, and like each kid, you re-evolve as a parent to try to figure it out differently. So for me, the biggest thing that I do that I think my parents never did is I own my mistakes with my kids. And so if I'm overly harsh or critical, if I am pushing probably too hard, I have the conversation with them about why I'm doing this. I talk to them about the intent behind it. I acknowledge their feelings. So if they are feeling upset or angry, I say, I could see why you would feel that way. And so, I have the unique ability, and I don't know where this comes from, but I can remember all those emotions as a child and how I felt in certain times. And I try not to forget that with my kids, that their emotions are valid and that their emotions are theirs. Now, that's not saying that I'm a pushover, because I'll call them out on it when it's BS. And we'll have a conversation about where I'm coming from. I mean, a great example is, 2 weeks ago, my oldest son is 10. And I grew up playing sports my whole life. I played sports in college. So I'm innately fairly competitive. I also coached at a college level. I coached semi-pro water polo when I was in Australia. So I've also coached at a fairly high level. So I know athletes that are really talented. I know athletes that could be really talented. And I know athletes that get labeled with the word potential the rest of their life. So I'm really keenly aware of this. And so with my 10-year-old son, he's at soccer practice. And he goes, "Dad, I don't want to play with the older kids anymore. I want to go back to the younger kids." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, why? I'm like, don't. And I started like laying into him, like, don't take the easy way out. Take it as a challenge. And he's like, Dad, the big kids push me down. I'm like, good, get up, be smarter. Anyhow, at the end of the day, I said, make your own choice, do what you want to do. And he was in the back. He was really upset. He was crying. And I was really being quite difficult. I was just really kind of laying into him saying, this is a metaphor for life, Branson. If every time you take the easy way out because it's difficult, you're going to do that the rest of your life. So take this as a challenge. And Trey, I don't know your background for sports, but there was the kids that would step up to that challenge, and they would thrive being the smallest kid because no matter what, they wanted to prove themselves. So after soccer practice, my kid went to, Branson went to the lower group. I talked to him and I said, listen, I need you to understand that I'm not trying to be mean. I want the best of you, and I see what you can be, and I want you to learn through the challenges. And he was like, Dad, I get it. I understand. It's just not fun for me. So I have to respect that side of the conversation as well, not just what I'm trying to do. So the point I'm making is that we had that conversation at the end of the time. I didn't let it just linger in his brain and let him create his own meaning. I helped facilitate what that meaning was based on my intent. And then I listened to his intent. And then we agreed that he can do what he wants as long as he understands where I'm coming from, and that he has to acknowledge that by not challenging himself, he's not growing. And we do it in a way that's healthy, I think. My daughter, it's a different way. She's much more sensitive. And she also is not competitive. So I think the irony is that my wife and I are really competitive. Like my wife, she's a triathlon coach. She wins a bunch of triathlons here in the region. And she kicks my ass out there. I'm actually known as Mary Kelley's husband in the triathlon circle. I don't have a name, but we're both really competitive within ourselves, like pushing ourselves. And so far, our two oldest kids are not. And so we don't know what to do with ourselves. We're like, what's going on here? But as a parent, I think one of the things you learn is that, and my parents, so I will say this about my parents, excuse me, they never actually pushed me. They gave me space, maybe voluntarily, maybe because they were lazy, I don't know, but they gave me space to make my own choices. Sometimes the detriment of my choices. They never pushed me in school. My dad and mom would always just say, did you try hard? And I learned in third grade that if I just said yes, they would leave me alone, right? Like that was what I figured out pretty early on. Did you try hard on that spelling test? Yes. Okay, great. You got a C. And it was never like, okay, well, what do you need to do to get an A? It was never that next step where I know that. So now I take that next step to my kids and say, okay, well, what do you need to do to get that next level up? So I don't know if that answers your question, Trey. Sorry, that was a long monologue.
No, I like it, dude. It's awesome because I played sports. I wasn't bad. I wasn't the best. Played football, wrestling, baseball, swimming, everything pretty much. And my wife was, she played sports all through her life. And then our oldest, Cam, he is not into sports. I mean, he plays soccer, but he does taekwondo, but he's not like into it like I was. Like I was just naturally go walk up, pick up a bat and a glove and just get after it. And, he is more so into Legos, and he's definitely going to be a scholar.
How old is he?
He's 8. He's going to be 9 in April. But I'm learning how to accept that, right? So I'm learning that he is his own person, and he's a beautiful person, and that is what he's into. And it's not what I expect, but you know what? He is his own person, and I need to support that. My daughter, on the other hand, is a stud at soccer. She's a stud at everything she does, gymnastics, dance, and it's just a different world because I had all brothers. We all played. I have one sister and 4 brothers, and we didn't go to dance. We didn't do that girly stuff, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's just different. It's a different experience for me. So, I can relate to you because it's like it's not what I wanted, or as a first time dad, like I was like buying the little glove and buying all the sports stuff, and it was like I cannot wait to bronze his baby shoes because he's going to be a stud in football or something. And then like come to find out he hates football, and he's his own person, but I love him to death, and I want to nourish whatever he's into. I want to make him his own person. Whatever he's into, I want to nourish that. So he's into reading, and he's into what is it now? It's the Avengers and stuff like that. Like I try to feed into that for him. I just think it's crazy, man. It's like there's no book on being a father. There's nothing. There's no leadership book.
Well, the problem is there's like 27,000 books on being a father, and they all contradict each other. And then they tell you you're screwing your kid up. And the reality is you just do the best you can. Like that's the reality, right? You just do the best you can with what you know. And as long as you're open to the possibilities that there's another way than what you know, and you're willing to change and evolve, that's what matters. And I was thinking about your son, like, one of the things I'm always keen on with my son is that he's athletic, like he does things. He doesn't know how to push himself. He has no idea. But I just keep exposing him to different sports. Like my son is super into, so your son is 8. I don't know if he plays Fortnite or not, but my son is completely addicted to Fortnite at 10. And he does every single Fortnite dance. And he does it well. And so we keep saying like, why don't you do dance? And he's like, my friends will make fun of me. So like, he's really into stuff, which is cool. I wish I did more of that stuff. My son would be an amazing golfer. He would be an amazing swimmer. But at the end of the day, like, if he's not into it, it doesn't really matter. And if your son, because he's the oldest, is like my son, he has hyper focus when he's into something. Like when he's into it, it's like 1,000% into it. So, my son is, Branson is the oldest, is super into music. So he can sit down, listen to a song, and learn it in 25 minutes on a piano, and is really gifted. And so that's not a braggadocious thing. It's just like each child has their unique gifts. And as a parent, our job is to scan the horizon to figure that out, to give your kid the purpose and vision and desire and drive to be the best they can at whatever that is. My daughter is never going to be an amazing student. She'll be a good student, but she'll never be like my son, who's just through the roof on everything. But she's an amazing, gifted creator, curious. She loves to take things apart and make slime. And, she's just, her curiosity is her superpower, and it's also her super villain at the same time. Right? It gets her into trouble, but man, it's amazing. So we're always trying to foster this idea of curiosity with her. And what does that look like? My third child is another son. He's just like his brother, hyper gifted, super smart, but he's super competitive because he's the second boy. So he might just be absolutely amazing at sports because he wants to just beat the crap out of everybody because he was always younger. So my point is that each child is on their own journey. And as a parent, and I struggle with this, we can't lump them together as one sum. They are each individual identities. And our goal in our house is to create the environment that allows them to bond as human beings and respect each other on their own unique gifts. I will say living in the Middle East and living away from all of our family allows us to put ourselves first as a family, to create a nucleus that is really unique and strong and a shared experience. Often when you live near your family, like you live near your family, it's easy not to create those shared experiences because you always are running around to your mom's house, your aunt's house, your sister's, You're always going these different places. And that's really important. Our kids don't actually know their aunts and uncles very well. But from a family perspective, we spent 6 weeks in Portugal 2 years ago. Last summer, we spent 6 weeks driving 7,500 miles across the U.S. Excuse me, in a Ford Explorer. Like, that's insane. Who does that with their kids? This summer, we're going to stay here and be in 120-degree temperature for 2.5 months. Who does that with their kids? Who does that, period, really? Let's be honest. And so we are keenly aware of creating these unique experiences with our children so that they have a unique bond with us as adults when they are adults. And they come, you remember we were there? And so, but again, at the end of the day, there is no manual that says this is the absolute right way to do it. It's the right way for you and your family and your structure. And you just got to figure out what that looks like for you.
I love that. So how do you get 6 weeks of like, have you created like your life in this financial freedom, like dream of being
Oh,
able
dude,
to?
I am poor as dirt. Are you kidding me?
I mean, 6 weeks. I mean, that sounds like, all right. So I'm gonna be honest with you. Like that sounds like something like my dream, right? So have 6 weeks and travel the country, and then I remember that my daughter can barely drive to the beach 2 hours without throwing a fit, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, screw that.
Yeah. um, so, my primary job is in higher education. And so with that, inevitably, at the end of May, end of June, we're off. So, during the school year, and I think, I'm a huge pro teacher guy. Like I think teachers are the most unsung heroes in the world. And I think that as a society, we really undervalue the role of education plays with our kids. And the reason why I say that is that often communities who don't support pay raises for your teachers, bonds for the school, yes, they need to be accountable how they spend the money and all that stuff, is that they don't think about the inputs of those kids and the outputs of the jobs later in that community. And I think that often we are so short-sighted. So I am a very pro teacher, and I think teachers work harder than almost anybody because during the school year, they're working 80, 90 hours a week. I mean, they work hard. So that being said, in higher ed, we work really ridiculous hours because we're doing research, we're grading papers, we're in the classroom, we're on committees. And so we are rewarded, I don't know the right way to say it, summers off to go do what we got to do. Usually it's research. That's what most people do. I don't love traditional academic research. So I do other projects in the summer that give me fuel. Most projects I do, when we were in Portugal for 6 weeks, I wrote my book. So my kids went to the beach every day. I wrote a book. Last summer when we drove across the U.S., I did speaking gigs across the U.S. while they were off playing in parks or we were visiting relatives and things like that. So I tend to couple in work with the vacation at the same time for myself. Now, when my startup gets going, I'm not going to have 6 weeks off, at least not initially. One of the things that I think I've been very blessed with in my life, having spent 4 years living in Australia, 1 year living in Japan, I'll be out here 4 years. In fact, as an adult, as I graduated college, I've almost spent more time living abroad than in the US, as I've seen different organizational models and the impact that has on purpose and well-being. So as I create my organization, I'm keenly aware of creating a unique culture that I think respects human beings' life in a way that isn't about the ROI first. I think the biggest misgiving we've done in America and globally is the quarterly report. The quarterly report has completely effed up our ability to put human beings first. We put profit over people. And as soon as you do that, you really stop valuing the most important assets in an organization, the human. So anything that I create puts the human first, profit second, because I think that when you put the human first, the profits will come and they'll be better and they'll be longer and more sustainable at the end of the day. So I don't know where I was going with this, but
this is like, I like this freestyle kind of interview that I got going with you. I don't get much of these because everybody's different in how they interview and how people mesh. But it's funny is that the other day I was talking about leadership with someone, and I was like, I think that millennials are going to be like, if you're a leadership speaker and like you yourself and what you're doing now, like there's going to be money to be made because, I'm an old millennial, like gray haired millennial, like on the very end point of being considered a millennial. And it seems like everyone after me and some of the interns and some of the people that I train now that are millennials, the one thing they know all the book smarts in the world. They know all the theories, all the equations, everything. But the one thing they don't know is leadership. And that's one thing that they won't learn from a video game. Crazy. That's the one thing that I can say that I picked up on. And the only reason why I picked up on it was because My grandfather was a great leader. He watched nonstop John Wayne movies. So like he was like that. He was like, that's how he learned, right? So like he led by example. He had this idea what a leader was, and he was John Wayne, where I saw that as a grandson, and I was like, just in awe at this man, this guy who never smiled and never showed any emotion, was able to get men to do their jobs times 10. Mm-hmm. And nowadays it's where everyone needs to be coddled a little bit more, and to be a leader, it's harder for a millennial. Like, can you talk about that? Like, what is a millennial's idea of a leader?
Well, I think first of all, we have to identify that, excuse me, millennials, they have a belief that their voice should be heard. Right? So they talk up in meetings. You go back a generation, you're new to a company, you don't say a damn thing. You just sit there until you earn your stripes. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. I think it's a blessing because they come with new insights. It's a curse because when their manager is older and old school, they frown upon that. Even if their advice is misplaced. And I'm getting to your question in a second. One of the things we have to also recognize that millennials were raised in a time where they had access to give their voice whenever they wanted. Social media allowed them, the construct of social media said you can put your thoughts out there right away. And you know what? And when they're the right thoughts, you get immediate feedback right away. Is that their fault? No, that's the system. That's the construct of social media and instant gratification. I don't think it's their fault. I think what happens is over time, they acclimate to the new environment, but they come in with this preconceived idea of giving voice and opinions. And I think that's okay. So I think, there are certain challenges to millennials and leading millennials. I think the biggest thing that you have to acknowledge with them, and I think motivate them, is you have to treat them like human beings first. And you have to acknowledge they do have thoughts and opinions, and you have to give them, I think in my mind, and I have not managed many millennials. I teach lots of millennials and now Gen Zers. When you make them feel valued and give them little mini projects that show that they can succeed, that builds respect with them and for them. And often millennials think they can do all this stuff because you know what? They can go on the internet and find all the answers they want to find as fast as possible. And they can produce good work, and you have to give them guardrails and accountability. And I was thinking about your grandfather. I think one of the things that sometimes is lacking in our society is that level of behavioral integrity. This is one of the concepts in my book, is that the best leaders had high levels of behavioral integrity. When they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. Again, I think that we live in a world where we say, hey, I'll meet you we should meet up for drinks, meaning we're never going to meet for drinks, right? Let's go get a coffee sometime. That means we're never actually going to get a coffee at some time. We live in a time where we're in a meeting and people are on their damn phone saying they're taking notes or whatever, but they're actually surfing the web, right? So we live in a time where our behavior doesn't actually match the expectation of what we need as a leader. And I think we don't make people accountable for that moment. We don't say, hey, listen, I'm here to lead this meeting. My expectation is that you respect that and you're present in the meeting. And if you want to take notes, I recommend we either do it old school, pen and paper, right? Or we have a secretary in there, or it's not secretary, it's a really bad term, sorry. We have someone in there who's taking notes, right? That can distribute the notes after the meeting, right? But we all need to be present and intentional in those meetings. Because I think often, here's what I find. When I'm in meetings, I see people with their laptop open, on their phones. I know they're not listening to anything the person is saying who's actually leading the meeting. They're not listening to anything. And I think to myself, why are we having the meeting then? If no one's actually going to listen, what's the point? So with millennials, I think for them, you have to meet them where they're at. I think that's really important. But I also think you have to get them through conversation to understand where they need to go. And so those are conversations like, where do you want to be in 10 years? X, Y, and Z. And okay, great. You want to be a CEO, a manager? Great. What do you have to learn to be there? And that's part of that career development, right? So think forward, reason back. So I want to be in X position in 10 years. Here are the skill sets that you need to have. And when you have that conversation with your millennials, they're smart enough to connect the dots. Okay, I'm gapped there. I need this. I need that. Okay. And again, then you're creating a value structure for them where you say, I think that you're valuable enough that I'm going to take time to show you where you need to go and what journey you need to go on. Whether you're here or not, it doesn't matter. And the reality is that millennials change jobs. I think it's something like every 18 to 24 months. They're hopping around. At some point that ends, right? Mid 30s, you get a family. I think the paranoia of changing jobs is much higher at that point. But when you're young, I'm not against it at all. I think it's good for an organization to have new blood come in with new ideas. I think your question is difficult, and I'm kind of talking a lot about it because at the end of the day, every human being needs the same core things. They need to feel connected. They need to have purpose. They need to have mastery of whatever it is they're doing. And when you can accomplish those things in an organization, what generation they're in becomes irrelevant. I'm not just saying that. There's science behind it. There's 25 years of science behind this particular theory that I'm thinking of, and it's called self-determination theory. So just in the title itself, it's giving people the ability to feel like they can self-determine where they're going, gives them a greater purpose. And we also know that in research that when we attach someone to the greater purpose of the organization, that allows them to also flourish and work for someone. You see this in corporate world and really unhealthy environments. It's every, man, woman, child, dog, and cat for themselves at the end of the day. And in those environments, they're like General Electric, Exxon. You rank. I think GE may make you rank the employees. So as a manager, my brother-in-law worked for Exxon. He has to rank 1,000 employees, 1,000. 1 to 1,000. He has to rank them. And then he has to tell the bottom 10% that if you don't step it up, you got to go. So what kind of competition does that create inside an organization versus collaboration? Right? So when you create competition, inevitably competition in its purest sense means someone has to win. And if someone has to win, someone has to lose. And when you have a winner versus loser mentality, then that's when ethics start to go out the window at times. So there's healthy competition, but there's also unhealthy competition. And when you're talking about survival, ethics will go out the window. At the end of the day, your survival will supersede the ethical line in an organization. And so I think that in a world of cooperation and collaboration, you get more done. There's science behind this idea of tapping the collective intelligence that says when you bring in all the voices in the system, the whole system, when you bring it all in at one time to listen, to hear, to share, to support, you actually quicken innovation. You actually quicken or raise ROI. You actually increase length of stay. You actually decrease turnover. But you have to be willing as a leader in an organization to allow all the voices to be heard. And sometimes that is uncomfortable for leaders because they want to be seen as the person who has to be right, to have all the answers. But then that's not human, is it? Like as a human, you don't have all the answers as an individual. So the best leaders welcome all the voices, listen to all the alternatives. They're eager and curious, as I said earlier, about what are all the options on the table, what are the best choices that we can make, and they don't have to be my choices. They have to do what's best for the greatest good and for the organization on the whole.
Just go ahead and drop the mic on that one. Phenomenal. So I'm going to throw you a little curveball. What would you say to your 25-year-old self?
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's the exact same question I used to ask all my guests. I honestly have thought about this for myself. And I think at 25, I was a delinquent, for sure. Someone would argue I'm still a delinquent now. I've always gone to my own drumbeat. I would tell myself at 25, be okay with the unknown, be okay with the journey, and be open to the possibility to take risks. At 25, I did take a ton of risks, but none of them were intellectual risks. None of them were career risks. And you know what I tell my 25-year-old self? You're all right. You're a good person. You have good attributes. You are intelligent. Trust yourself. I didn't have a lot of those things. And even now at 44, I battle with those things in terms of, and I know it sounds to maybe your audience a little ridiculous. Here's a guy who has a PhD. I have 2 masters, which is I'm overqualified for like 95% of whatever's out there in the world. And at the same time, underqualified for the other 95%. Is that you belong in the conversation. When people lack confidence, they don't believe they belong in the conversation. They don't believe they belong in the room to have an opinion. And that lack of confidence erodes your ability to accelerate your career. And don't confuse confidence with arrogance. Because being arrogant means you're an asshole, but being confident means that you're positive and I think being confident means he's okay with being wrong. I think being confident also means being okay with being right. And being confident means being willing to listen. Being arrogant means that you know it all. And there's a total difference there.
Well, how do you become more confident?
Oh, geez. If I had that answer, I would have done that at 25. Yeah.
So let me ask you that. Do you feel like you're confident now at 44? I mean, you're getting ready to step out into the startup world, getting ready to, I'm assuming you're in the seed round, right?
Yeah.
Your first seed round.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you have confidence now getting ready to explore this venture?
I believe I don't have a choice. I don't know, and I don't put confidence on the table. I believe that for me.
So it's survival.
It's not even survival. Well, it's my internal drive. And so for me, life will nudge you whether you want it to or not and where you're supposed to go. Now, I'm not a hugely spiritual person in terms of religion, but I do believe that in this world, there are certain innate gifts that we have, and that if you don't utilize those gifts, life will keep nudging you to utilize those gifts. You can fight against those nudges, but you will feel miserable inside over time. And so over the last 10 years, I've tried to start probably 5 or 6 businesses. And I always pull out of them because I've got 4 kids, or at the time I had 1 kid or 2 kids or 3 kids. I just keep procreating until I snip myself, and then I said I'm done. And then I realized that I don't have a choice, that I have to do this. Because if I don't go chase this down and I don't do what I think I believe I'm talented in, if I don't follow the advice I've given myself and given others based on my book, based on my learnings, then I'm a fraud. Like I'm not living with behavioral integrity, right? Like I'm saying, go do this stuff, but I'm not going to do it. Well, what kind of hypocrisy is that? And so in higher ed, higher ed's a broken system in a lot of ways. So I can't fulfill my entrepreneurial drive that I have and I've had probably forever. I just ignored it. And so at 44, confidence really isn't a choice for me. It is, I have to do this or I need to get off the toilet forever. That's how I feel about it, you know? And so as I go down this path, I've had some really amazing conversations with some really large organizations here in the Middle East already about what I'm doing. And I just say, I don't have all the answers, but I'll get them. Let's go on the journey. This is something, and this will help you, and this is an amazing space, and here's the product, and this product will evolve because it's version 1. And version 2 is going here, and version 3 is going there, and I'm very clear with where I'm going. And whatever I don't know, I'm confident enough to get the people in that do know it. And I think when I was younger, I felt like I had to know all those answers, which was masquerading as insecurity. And so now I don't masquerade that anymore. I don't know big data. I don't know artificial intelligence. I don't know machine learning. I don't know how to do bookkeeping. I mean, I can make some of this stuff up, but it's going to fall short at some point. So why bother?
That is crazy. So like you feel like if you don't do this, right? So like you have this book that says go out and achieve your dreams, go out outside of your comfort zone and chase after your dreams. And if you don't do this yourself, you're a hypocrite. Do you think that it's that, or do you think that you're just this entrepreneur that if you don't do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life?
It's both and. So if I can't walk the walk, well, what good are philosophies, right? It's a philosophy, but I want to be able to show that I think my philosophy works better than other philosophies. And if I don't do it, a part of me will die inside.
Well, what's your biggest fear?
Not doing it.
Not doing it? What about failing?
Yeah, not at all. I could care less. No, failing to me is, if you were to look at the history of my life, I've got a few truckloads of failures, poor decisions, illicit choices that impacted human beings in a negative way. I got a long list, but at the end of the day, I own every single one of those because I believe that every single one of those was a for me moment, not a to me moment. And so I don't care about failing. Like failing, my wife hates failure. In fact, we've had robust discussions about me going out on my own, and she's finally come.
Is she for it or against it?
Yeah, she'll tell you for it. My instinct is she's partially against it because, and I understand this. We have 4 kids. She's not the primary breadwinner. I am. She doesn't. She's an amazing mom. The kids definitely love her more than me, and they need her. They also need food in their mouth. They need clothes on their body. They need a place to live. And so she has natural skepticism, not about me, but natural skepticism about what if it all fails. And I always come to the point of we'll be okay. Every financial hardship we've had, every moment, just last month we were down to about $50 in our bank account. And I'm grossly overeducated, as I said, for almost everything on this planet. And yet we're still not getting enough money to get by. And so my theory is I can always find a job somewhere. So for me, I'd rather do what's going to get me excited every single day. And I have to preference all of this to saying that I was raised in a house with my mom, who was the breadwinner, by the way, who came home every day and complained about her job, how miserable it was, how much she hated it, disliked it. So imagine you get 10 years of that talking about corporate world. How excited are you going to be about going out to work for somebody? So that's always been over my head. So I have no fear of failure. My wife has fear of financial discomfort. I could care less. I think we'll fall on our feet and I'll be okay with it. And maybe that's me being totally blind to the reality. But Mary is completely supportive of me chasing my dream in a way that doesn't bankrupt our family. I can appreciate that perspective. So I think the short answer is she supports me with some caveats in terms of making sure that we can put food in our kids' mouths.
I love that because I think, yeah, absolutely. My wife says, she's very supportive of my ideas and my business plan. But then again, it's everyone's comfortable where they're at. Like we're here, we just built a house. We have 2 cars. We live in America. We're living the American dream, and she's comfortable with what we have now because we have it. And to go outside of the comfort zone and not know what is out there, what is going to happen to us if I do something different?
Sure.
What's going to happen if I go out and I fail? Which is everyone's concern. I think everybody has those fears and those nightmares. But then again, like that's why everyone follows everyone else. Everybody wants to conform because they see what everybody else is doing and what works, and they don't take the time to get outside their comfort zone, where that's exactly where growth starts. That's exactly where growth happens. That's where you grow as a person. That's where, like I told her the other night, I was like, You know what? If let's say I go out on my own and I start a venture and I fail, like I feel like I'm confident and competent enough to go out and get it. I'll go out and survive. Like we'll survive. It's not a I'll go out and bar back.
Yeah.
I'll go out and do whatever I have to do to produce revenue for our family. It's like, but it's not. I'm going to work towards something else. Like it's not going to, I'm not going to stop there. It's gonna. I am the type of person that I just realized that I'm an entrepreneur like 3 years ago, and entrepreneurs to me, like it's so weird because it's like if we're not happy and content in doing what we're doing, like it just we're bad at husbands, we're bad fathers, we're bad with everything else in our lives. Like we have to. I don't know. In my example,
I totally agree with that statement.
In my example, I need to be a better father. I need to be a better husband. So that means I need to go out and do something that fulfills me. And creating my own success, creating my own business, creating a community that is wrapped around the idea of self-betterment and self-growth is where I want to be. Is because, like you were talking about, having that atmosphere of collaboration, having that atmosphere of having a unit of a group of people that can share ideas and back each other up. That is where innovation is. And that's what I want to have. That's what I want to create. So,
At the end of the day though, like, and the other way I look at it too is that you don't want to be 60 going, well, shit, I wish I would have done this at 35. It would have been a lot easier. Because at least at 35, you can bounce back, right? At 60 and you do it, and you lose your whole entire retirement doing something stupid or entrepreneurial, you can't get that back. It's really hard.
It seems like that idea of you can do what you want is starting to increase. Like it's starting to, I don't know if you see it over there, but over here I see it where like everybody's listening to like Gary V and they're trying to do the Instagram thing and they're trying to, make it. But it's like, to me, that's not real. Like that's, I don't know. It's not real to me. Like that's not a real entrepreneur. Like to me is someone who, like you and I have high stakes. We have families, we have kids, we have people that survive because of us. And to be able to, I don't want to say gamble, but take strategic.
You could say gamble. It's a gamble. It's a calculated risk. At the end of the day, that's a gamble. It's a calculated risk of I'm going to put my skill set on the line for the betterment of my family. I mean, that's a calculated risk. You're putting your ass on the line. It's a risk. It's a gamble.
But to be able to do that, like to me, that's insane. Like I feel like I could if like it scares the shit out of me, right? It scares the shit out of me if I get this thing up and running and here I am with the keys to this business in my hands, and now I'm faced with the idea of this is where I'm going and I have to be here and do the work because I wanted this and now I have to make it work. So that scares the crap out of me, but I'm willing to do it. Like I've had nightmares about this. Like I know that this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. But then it's like you turn around and you look and you got a wife and 3 kids looking back at you and you're like, man, I got this house. I got, we're
what
good.
though? Can I flip that script on you a little bit?
Yeah.
So here's the way I look at it, right? Those are all super valid points, 100% valid. And the way I look at it is, what type of role model will you be for your kids when they see you go out there and create something and work your ass off? You come from a blue collar family, which means you have a work ethic. You know how to work your ass off. You've had no choice your whole life. In that, your kids learn work ethic and creation of something that's amazing. They also learn to see how you struggle, how you succeed, how you transform, how you support others. Like, they'll see it in real time because you'll probably, as they get older, bring them into the process to help with certain things. And I think that to me is a legacy. Showing up to a job, working 9 to 5 is an important thing. I think it is super important. But I think about what type of role model will I be for my kids? What will they learn from me when like what will I be able to provide for them down the road that I can't do now? There's nothing wrong with being comfortable and content. That's how many people live, and I wish I was like that. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's bigger than just the paycheck. It's showing your kid that you're feeding your soul, you're feeding who you are, and I think as a dad, one of the biggest gifts we can give our kid is our vulnerability. And to say I'm a human being and I make mistakes and I'm growing and I'm striving, but it's to show you that there are different ways and different options and different models out there to be a good human being as well. And I don't know, like I just think of it totally different. I respect that point of view. I just don't want to be 50 and in the same, you're in a different financial situation than I am. I'm still virtually broke and I'm 44. Right? I have no retirement going on in the States right now. I've got 4 kids to pay for university, most likely. I'm already paying about $35,000 a year for just education here. Like, what am I, like, I'm not showing my kids how to grow. I'm just showing my kids how to survive. And a survivor's mentality is important for resilience, but you need to move past that survivor mentality to accelerate your own personal and family ROI. And, you know, as in my mind, this is where I'm really traditional, which is ironic, is that I'm kind of the tip of the iceberg. I'm the tip of the pencil in the family. So as I go, we go. And if I don't go in a way that's healthy for me and healthy for the family, then we don't go that way. If we stick in survival mode and we're still happy and healthy, that's great. But how am I teaching my kids to accelerate their life and their careers? I'm not, you know, so.
So to go along with that, right? So you are this entrepreneur mind, you know, you have this mindset. I love that quote, feeding your soul. And I think our wives are very similar. How do you explain to her this is your calling?
10 years. I guess, and that's 12 years. It'll be 12 years in June. Basically just saying, like, I am unhappy. I am not thriving.
But did you explain to her, like, at the beginning, did you say, hey, look, I'm an entrepreneur?
No.
Or was it kind of like...
I didn't know that then. So here's what I thought would happen when I got my PhD. And this is not what happened. I thought I'd get my PhD. I would start working in a safe environment. Then I'd be able to consult on the side with Fortune 500 companies, all of those things. Never happened. Didn't happen year 1, year 2, year 3. Year 4, I tried to create a startup. It was a retail startup that I thought was a really unique model. It was in a space I thought my wife was in line with. And then I had her on the couch and I said, okay, sign this document so we can release our 401k and invest it in the business. And she was in tears. So my choice was very clear. End up ruining my marriage or go back to doing my day job. That was the first one. So I parked that startup. And then the next startup was, all right, well then I'll just do a consulting business, right? And I'll push it out there and I'll do it really hard. There's no investment, it's just my time. But you know what? Nobody saw me as an expert. So I spent 12 months churning out my first consulting, job. I got like 2 or 3 gigs, but that was it. And I wasn't thriving, but she was happy. There was no threat. Then fast forward, we move here and I created another startup that was around consulting in this region. And it was doing this essentially creating partnerships from around the world to do corporate health and wellness and to do it in the Middle East. The problem was I wasn't passionate about that, but I wanted to create something. So I had like 10 companies on board where we would profit share and I would get them into organizations here and I would do all of that, but I really didn't give a shit. Like I wasn't into it. But again, it was no investment on our end. So I could tick the box for my wife and she would be happy. Now fast forward to qChange. I got some capital. I invested in it to make this product. And now I have a viable product. And I basically said to Mary, I was like, listen, if I do not pursue this, I will hold this against you the rest of my life. I will resent you. I was very direct. I said, I understand why you put the kibosh on a lot of this stuff where you don't want to take the risk. But if I do not chase this down, I will have resentment for you. And if you don't support me in me trying to do what I want to do and in doing it in a safe way that doesn't put anyone in danger in our family, I'm going to resent you in the long term. And that's not good for our marriage. And we took a class together called Ready, Set, Love. It's an online marriage course. How long have you been married?
It will be. Oh, why you put me on the spot like that, man? What is it? My son is eight.
He's 8.
It'll be 8 years.
Okay, so it's an online course. I'd recommend you guys take it. It's a 12-week course. It really forces you to talk about a lot of topics you probably haven't talked about in a long time. Mm-hmm. So it was a way for us to. My theory: we invest in cars, we invest in houses, we invest in stocks. You probably should invest in your marriage, right? So we decided to invest in our marriage. I think it was like $400 or whatever it was, but it's a 12-week course that really forces you once a week to kind of talk about topics that are really interesting and probably important. All the finance, visions, desires, sex, like anything you can think of, it comes up. So anyhow, it was during this time where I was like, listen, if you stop me again because of your fears, you're going to create resentment, because I need to do this for myself. And I will take as many calculated risks that put us on the positive side, not the negative side. But there is never any guarantee in this process. But I need to know you have my back. I need to know that you're willing to go on the ride with me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And trust in my ability to do the right things to put us in the right situations most of the time. Her response is, I trust you, I don't trust the system. And I said, you're right, the system sucks sometimes, but you got to trust me in the system, make the best I can make. I go, you won't find anyone who out-hustles me, who outworks me, who out-conversations me, who out-networks. You won't find people that do that. I will bust my ass for that. And in that, good things will happen. If you just stay on the line. Now, I have to be clear. I'm in a really lucky situation where I have a job that I have a ton of flexibility. You have a very rigid job. So everything you have to do is from 6 to 10, 11 o'clock at night. And that is a really tough time to do it. It's not impossible. What I have found is that you can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. That's the critical piece. And so I'm constantly reminding myself I have a team of people around me in different parts of the world that I can bounce ideas off of that help support me. So if you're going to do it, I would encourage you to find the 2 or 3 people that you trust that are willing to go on this journey with you as well. Because in that network, like, I don't know about you, but I often feel like I'm in my own boat rowing by myself. That is the worst place to be, in the middle of an ocean trying to row a boat. You know what? If I'm in a big vessel with a bunch of other people, it's much easier to navigate that ocean. So, I would encourage you to try to find people who believe in what you're trying to do and think the same thing, because together great things happen. Alone, it can happen. It's not impossible, but man, the struggle is real when you're on your own.
You're absolutely right. Like, sometimes I'll bring my head up for some air and it's like days have gone by and I'm like, what is going on? Like, I'm so involved in the work, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a lot. I mean, from networking to business plan, market research, finding out who your market is, market share, everything.
But you can get stuck in those details and forget the big picture, right? Like, if you're a detail person, to me, that's the difference between a manager and a leader. A manager does transactional stuff. A leader's constantly going up 10,000 feet, coming back down to 1,000 feet, and then back up to 10,000 feet, back down to 1,000 feet. They're able to transition between the two because they have to be thinking big picture and direction that they're going. At the same time, they have to be able to do the tasks. So right now, I'm doing tasks. Like, I've just created a promotional flyer, a banner. I've hired people to do it. I don't know if you've ever heard of Fiverr, Fiv, whatever. I've gotten amazing work from 2 different people for a total of $75. That I could have got someone in the U.S. It would have cost me probably $1,000.
Yeah.
Right. So what I realized, I started to create these things. I'm like, why am I utilizing those resources on details I hate doing when I can have someone else do it who loves those details? So I go down, where are the tactics I need to do? And I go up, where do I need to go? How do I need to get there? Where do I need to go? How do I need to get there? And I just go back and forth in my mind doing that all the time. But if you're so detailed oriented, Trey, you're going to get stuck in the details and you're gonna drive yourself mad. So if you have the capital to hire out people at Fiverr, whatever the hell it's called, to do a lot of those transactional stuff, you have to write the brief. You've got to do a little bit of that upfront work. But man, does it just relieve you. Even in the podcast. Like, I wish I had the capital to have someone else do all the editing. Mm-hmm. Like, I would have just been, boom, done, happy as a clam. Especially towards the end when I was just getting tired of editing every single time. So just when you're on your journey, know you're not alone. Know there's resources there. Connect to the community who's trying to create something, because that will give you fuel to keep going. But more importantly, my wife's best and worst trait is she is so detail oriented that she can't actually grow her own business. Like, it always has to be perfect. It always has to be 100% right. And I'm always like, man, good is good enough, or perfect is the enemy of done. Get it done, man. Like, if it's not perfect, we can go back and do it later. Like, just get it done, move on, get it done. So that to me is the difference between a manager who wants perfection and a leader who wants to get it done, because there are certain things that have to be perfect, and there's things that don't. Like, there's just certain things that don't have to be perfect. And so I don't mix the two up. Like, I know what has to be perfect and what doesn't, and what doesn't, I don't waste my time. I just move on. Yeah.
I could talk to you all night. Tell us how we can connect with you. How can we reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can learn more about me at Dr. James Kelley, KELLEY.com. You can also, you can get the book there. You can also get the book on Amazon, The Crucible's Gift, 5 Lessons from Authentic Leaders Who Thrive in Adversity. You can also learn more about qChange by going to qChange.life and check that out. I'm always looking for people to partner, help, whatever. Yeah, so those are the 2 big ways to get a hold of me. And obviously email me at james@drjameskelley as well.
That is awesome. I want to say thank you, Dr. Kelley, for joining us today on Your Superior Self. It has been a fantastic talk. I've taken so many notes. I can't wait to go back through them and dive into them and apply them to my life. So thank you, sir, for joining the show.
Trey, thanks so much for your time, energy, and willingness to have me on your show.
I want to say thank you to Dr. James Kelley for coming on the show and hanging out with us today. It was a great interview. I got a ton of value out of our conversation. I hope you guys did too. If you made it this far, congratulations. This is probably one of the longest interviews I've ever had, but I didn't want to stop because we were really connecting on the whole idea of entrepreneurship, and I hope that you guys got a ton of value out of our conversation. I really do. Check me out on Instagram at TDowns80, on Twitter at DownsTrey. Check me out on Facebook at Trey Downs, DOWNES. Hit me up on the group Your Superior Self. I would love to add you to the community. Thanks, guys, for downloading the episode, and I hope you have a great week. Later.